In today's world of beyond exponential change and disruption, you're either going to be more relevant or less relevant. There's no middle anymore. You're either going to be the disruptor or the disrupted. Now, most of you know from my anticipatory organization systems that there are hard trends based on future facts that will happen. That lets you see disruption and change before it happens, turning disruption into a choice. The other type of trend, of course, is the soft trend, which is based on an assumption. So when you have those hard trends identified, you can literally see disruption and use it to your advantage. Also, disruption is seen as negative for most people. Why is that? Because it happens to you, and now you got to crisis manage and react to that disruption. But not all disruption is negative. As a matter of fact, Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, does he see disruption as negative? No, it's all the people he's disrupting that see it as negative. You can do that regardless of your size. What I want us to become is positive disruptors, creating the transformations that need to happen to increase our relevancy and accelerate innovation and growth. And that's why I'm really excited to bring you today's expert, Joe Calloway, who will share strategies and insights helping us accelerate innovation and growth by turning disruption into opportunity. Joe is an author, investor, entrepreneur, and business advisor who has invested in and advises companies from the very largest of the large to snowboarding manufacturers and a wholesale bourbon business. He is the author of 8 books, all bestsellers, including Becoming a Category of One, Indispensable, Be the Best at What Matters Most, and The Leadership Mindset, just to name a few. Joe has spent the last 35 years as a business speaker and consultant and is now a principal in the Disruption Lab, a consulting group that advises companies on strategies for innovation and growth. And boy, we're going to get into those strategies for innovation and growth right now. Joe, welcome.
Great to be here, Dan. I wouldn't be anywhere else.
All right. Well, thank you. And Joe and I have known each other for many decades, and I was really excited when you were able to do this with us because you are a wealth of knowledge, and innovation is right up your field. As a matter of fact, they always talk about you got to get out of your box. Well, I think you have never been able to find the box. You are so far out of it. And with the Innovation Lab, there's a couple of things I want to talk about that. I don't want to spend all our time on that. I don't mean Innovation Lab. I'm sorry, the Disruption Lab, which is about innovation and growth. That's why it popped to that right away. So tell me what happens at the Innovation Lab and what kind of companies use it?
We advise companies on innovation strategy. And a lot of times the companies that come to us say what pretty much everybody says, which is, look, we know we need to innovate. We need some help on how to think about that. We need some help and when it comes to disruption, they need help with the concept of, because one way you can look at disruption is, it's the process of putting yourself out of business to become the next thing that you should be to be. And you used one of my favorite words a number of times in your opening, which is relevance. To me, all of this is about relevance. How do I stay relevant? The biggest threat to me and my business is that I might become irrelevant. Because if I'm irrelevant in the marketplace, I'm a goner. I'm out of business. And that's
the only way, Joe, that you or I or any of us can become irrelevant is to stop learning and growing and changing. And as a matter of fact, if you're changing today in a world of beyond exponential change, you're actually falling behind. You need to personally and organizationally transform. And just a quick thought on that, change comes from the outside in, forcing us to crisis manage and put out fires. But transformation, whether it's personal or business, always comes from the inside out, which gives you some control. So right now, off the bat, we're saying, look, Forget about change. I want us to transform. And if you're not transforming your mindset, probably you will be irrelevant.
And what I've discovered is that for me and for the companies that I and we work with that are most successful at innovation and a level of disruption, they are, and this is another one of my favorite words, they are very intentional about it. That gets to that difference between transformation and change. They have intention about the way they are transforming themselves, and that just ties right back into what you were saying about it doesn't happen to them. They are driving it, and when you're driving it, then it's like you said, it's not a threat except to maybe your competitors.
Right. Actually, the cost of not transforming yourself is greater than the cost of transforming yourself, because most of us are looking at how much is this going to cost me. And it is, well, actually, a wait and see attitude will cost you far more than actually rolling up your sleeves and digging in and innovating and creating new bouncing baby cash cows rather than just continuing to milk the old one.
You know, that's one of the things that I ask my clients fairly often is they'll be hesitant or wondering and thinking about, which is fine, it's part of the process, but they're hesitant to move ahead with internally driven change or transformation because they're thinking, or not even in terms just of how much will this cost me, but what's the price that I pay if it doesn't work? And I always say, well, and it may not work, but what's the price you pay if you don't do anything? What's the price you pay for standing still? Because that is generally going to be a much higher price.
Well, you just reminded me of a conversation I had with the CEO of a very large company. They're based out of Chicago. I won't mention them right now, but in that conversation with the CEO, he said, well, we're known as an innovation company. We're very innovative. We have an innovative culture. But I had studied them before I went in.
Yeah.
And so I had a little insight. And what I said is, yeah, you are, huh? Well, when was the last time you innovated? And he had to think for a minute. And after a few minutes of discussion, he realized it's been over 10 years since he's innovated. They've done nothing in 10 years. They had been milking what they had done for the last 10 years. In other words, we're an innovative company. No, let's reword that. We were an innovative company. Yeah. And do you want to continue to be in the past tense or the future tense? And it was a giant aha for that guy because in his mind, we're innovative. We've always been innovative. That's our culture. But yet they weren't innovating. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, a couple of thoughts. Number one, there are a lot of companies that will cite something from the culture statement that hangs on the wall. And in that case, it's like, you're right. They weren't innovative, but they sure talk about being innovative. And there are all sorts of companies and entities that talk a good game about this. You know, it's so interesting. I had a discussion this morning with the owner of a company, and he said, well, we want to be more innovative than we are. And I know that being innovative means being different. So we want to be different. And I said, wait a second. I said, if everybody starts wearing funny hats to work tomorrow, you're different. So, and I quoted him, Jony Ive, who was the chief design officer for Apple. And he said, being different is easy. Being better is hard. And that goes back to relevance, which to me equates with value. And all of this that we're talking about has to create value, or it could be just being different. And as a customer of whatever, I don't care if you're different unless different also means that you're better. Because when you're talking about better, you're talking about value, and that is talking about relevance.
All right. So a couple of quick things that come to mind, because I want us to, wherever possible, give them some action steps that those that are watching and viewing can take. So one action step I would suggest is to look at your organization and ask yourself, make a list of here are, starting from the present, going backwards, 5 years, no longer, what are the innovations you've done? Now, this could be a process innovation. It could be a technology innovation. It could be a sales innovation. It could be a customer service innovation, a customer experience innovation. Pick but what innovations have you done, just to see, are you indeed innovating or are you not? So there's as something that you can do. Secondly, we all have a mission statement. We've got a value statement. We've got a vision statement. But I've got a new one for you. I'd like you all to write out. I would like you, because it might help you, and that is, I'd like you to write out an impact statement. Now, let's just think about that. An impact statement. What is the impact? By the way, that's an active word, right? Yeah. So what's the impact you will have on your customers? What's the impact you will have on, and then you fill in the blank, and you have an impact statement, because that is more results oriented than a vision statement, a mission statement, a value statement. By the way, there's no results in any of that. But an impact statement, you know what? You got results now that are measurable. Thoughts on that? Because I'm just starting to get people doing that, and I think it's got some legs. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think that's such a great idea. It's so funny. A lot of times I'll look at a company's, their mission statement and all that stuff, and I kind of go, yeah, okay, that's fine. Now let's talk about, golly, it's exactly what you're talking about. I use different words. You know what came to mind when you were talking about impact? Because when you look at most truly disruptive companies, and maybe one of the most common examples that everybody knows about and can relate to is Uber. Okay, what did Uber do? And you look at most disruptions and certainly most really relevant innovations, and they all did this. Uber made it easier to get a ride. Boom. And one of the things that I talk to my clients about in terms of impact is, I'll say, here's a good place to start. How can you be easier to do business with? And that can often start a train of thought and a train of exploration that becomes a true innovation. Listen, the Disruption Lab deals more with healthcare companies than any other segment. This morning, I was on a Zoom call with a number of healthcare executives, and the whole discussion was about starting to see patients as consumers rather than patients, meaning that as a good thing, a positive thing. And so much of what we talked about was access. How can you innovate to improve access to healthcare? How can you make the process of healthcare and being more healthy, how can you make that easier? How can a hospital be easier to do business with? I use the example of comparing a hospital to the place where I get my tires for our cars. And the tire store is they are so professional and so well run and so easy to do business with, that when I took my sister to the hospital for something a couple of weeks ago, I thought the tire company should come in here and do a workshop for these guys. Well, and by the way, that brings up another, I think, useful idea, which is what's happening outside your industry that you look at it and you go, okay, that's cool in a substantive way. That they're doing something over there in the business totally unlike ours that is having a positive impact. What would our version of that be? That's called adaptive innovation, where you take an idea from over there, bring it over here, and you adapt it to your arena. And that can lead to, my gosh, I help clients make that become an ongoing process that they go through, where part of the culture is we look for new ideas everywhere. We don't just benchmark the other companies that do what we do.
Right, exactly. And we want to keep what I would, just to make it kind of simple, I like to think, let's keep our opportunity and antenna up.
Exactly.
Have it looking for those opportunities. Let me give you a real quick one. Just last week, I was presenting as a keynote speaker to an annual meeting of all the credit union leaders.
Yeah.
And before speaking to them, I always like to do a little research. I dug around a little bit, and I found a very small little credit union in the South where the CEO had her opportunity antenna, and she happened to notice that there were all of these personal, let's call them like golf carts, except they were like really expensive golf carts where people could drive them around, and they were all electric, by the way, and they could go from place to place. Now there were some that were natural gas powered, but it was a variety. And she thought, wow, they're all over the place. I mean, some people are using that as their car, and it was legal to drive them on streets. So here's her opportunity. Remember, she's a credit union.
Right.
She went in and talked to some of the dealers and said, how much do these things cost? Oh, 30,000, 35, 40K. She said, well, how do people get financing? Well, we have one relationship where we can do financing. And by the way, she looked, and the interest rates were already crazy. And
Yes.
she said, well, if a credit union could offer you a lot better rates, would you be interested? Make a long story short is she is now captured that market and expanding way out. That little credit union is growing like crazy. She just had her opportunity up. By the way, that's a credit union innovation, wouldn't it be? One other one from that same industry, I did a little looking and found there were 10 credit unions. By the way, there are many thousands of credit unions, but there were 10 that were actually allowing their members to, giving them advice on cryptocurrency, giving them advice and letting them buy, sell, and putting a system together. Now, here's the thing. If you look at the latest statistics, close to 80% of the adult population in the U.S. has played around and dabbled with crypto in some way, which means their credit union members are already doing it.
Yeah.
And there's trust with the credit union. You already have trust, but your trusted financial organization is not having anything to do with it, which makes me what? Trust them a little less. Or worse, let's go back to the beginning. They're a little less relevant, aren't they, Joe? So,
Yeah.
so these 10 have decided, actually, let's be more relevant to all of them and give them a place where at least they can learn about this stuff. And better yet, maybe a way that they can do something in a secure way through our credit union. Now, the only reason I'm bringing up those examples is this is about having your opportunity antenna up, and it's bringing outside innovation in and doing something. Neither of them invented a new widget, by the way. There was no new widget invented.
Yeah.
It was taking something, as you said, Joe, from the outside world and bringing it in. And that leads me to something I wanted to pick your brain on that is really good. And that is back to the Disruption Lab.
Yeah.
By the way, for anyone interested in the Disruption Lab, let's put that address up there. All right, there you go. And they mainly are working with healthcare now, but remember what they do applies to any business, not just healthcare. That just is a major segment of theirs, as he was mentioning. But in the Disruption Lab, one of the things that your Disruption Lab people do is they go around the world traveling to where innovation is happening. And they see what they're looking at, the movers and shakers. They're looking at individuals. They're looking at entrepreneurs, corporate innovators. And they're studying all of these different industries and the real innovators. What are some of the things they're learning and bringing back? Can you share some of those?
Oh gosh, yeah. We took a trip. One of my favorite trips that we took, and we took about 15 either senior executives or business owners. We went to New York City for a couple of days. Then we went to Barcelona for 5 days, and in Barcelona we visited about 25 different companies. And this was, from hospitals to schools to a concert promotion company to a car company. These executives that we had were all from very different companies, and it was an antenna field trip. Dan, that's what it was. I remember one that struck me this was a consulting company, kind of a consulting marketing innovation advisor. They worked with a hearing aid company. And this is such a simple human thing, but think of the experiential difference. Normally you order hearing aids and you go in and they say, okay, let's test it out. And they turn the hearing aid on and they do the tones for you. Boo, boo, boo. You know, can you hear this? Can you hear this? And it is what this consulting firm advised its hearing aid client to do was, you've got a 68-year-old person, 75-year-old person, they've got hearing aids for the first time. They had found out early on, just through conversation, very intentionally, what they did was said, tell me how this sounds. Played them one of their favorite songs from when they were a teenager or in their 20s. The patients would cry. I mean, the customers would cry at the experience of hearing their favorite song more clearly than they had in 20 years. And so this company, this advisory company, was looking for the human element. In Barcelona, we worked with a fascinating company, studied a fascinating company called SEAT, S-E-A-T. It's a car company. And their philosophy was, what we sell is basically this that you can use while you are transporting yourself from one place to another. And no individuals, well, very few individuals were buying their cars. They were selling their cars to municipalities, to city governments. And people they'd drive their car wherever they wanted. They'd get out and walk away and leave it there. And then they wanted to go somewhere else, they would go to a central spot that was closed and they'd get in another one. They would put in their code and all of their information was now in the car and they could use it while it was self-driving them to the destination. Gosh, there was a liquor store where you could go and touch a button for any of the bottles of liquor or wine, and a video would come up and tell you all about it. The tasting, where it was from, just all that stuff. Dan, it was almost like the light bulbs were exploding over everybody's heads as they thought, wow, what would my version of that be? I could do something like that. But I love that stuff. I love actually going in and seeing what these different companies are doing.
In my book, Flash Foresight, Joe, I talked about Miracle Ear and how I was speaking to Miracle Ear, which is a hearing aid company, one of the big ones. And I talked about how a lot of people that need hearing aids won't get them because it makes them feel old. So instead, they go around and, say, what all the time. I mean, at some point, they're going to have to get one of those horns. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I said, well, let's call it a hearing enhancement device. And instead of it just being a hearing aid, it's for hearing enhancement. For what? As you said, it could be for music, or it could be all kinds of things. In other words, let's reframe it. What is it really? And again, going back with healthcare and something you mentioned just a little while ago, let's talk about hard trends. And one of them categories is demographics. So again, baby boomers are chronologically going to get older. They're not going to get younger. And we know that when people get into their 85, 90 bracket, a lot of them fall. And when they fall, they break a hip or something. It could be their death, or it could be very painful, lots of surgeries and operations, things like that. And we know that that number is growing because we have an increasingly aging population. So could we do something about that? Well, with our innovation antenna up, knowing there's going to be a lot more of them and it's going to be expensive and painful and cause a lot more deaths, why don't we put a little rubbery thing around their shoe? They can get this. And there's a little sensor on the front. By the way, that sensor today could be 3D printed and the size of a fly's eye. And that little sensor is Bluetooth to what? Well, to a hearing aid or hearing enhancement device. And if you don't need a hearing aid, well, it comes with one anyway. You put it in. And then if you're walking and there's a step down, it'll say step down. If there's a step up, it'll say step up.
Wow.
If there's Johnny's toys in the way, it'll say Johnny's toys in the way. Now, what I'm describing right now does not exist. There is nothing like that. Now, here's my point. Do you think we'll never see anything like that? Or do you think we will? And I think you already know we will. Why? Because if it can be done, it will be done. If you don't do it, someone else will. So that is innovation using the hard trend of aging demographics. Now I look at technology innovation, which is accelerating at exponential rates, saying, what could we do about the problem of people falling? What I'm really getting at with healthcare here is shifting it from just a break fix to a predict and prevent.
Yeah.
And with an aging population, and by the way, we're not the only one. China, the one child thing didn't work out that good. Super aging. Europe is aging. Mexico is aging. With all these aging populations, we've got a lot of opportunity to predict and prevent. And from a healthcare standpoint, we better be doing that.
And, so much of what we're both talking about, going back to an earlier idea, is making something easier to do, i.e., easier to get around your house without falling down. I tell you, that's a great launch pad, my experience has been, for looking for ideas. What can we do that would make something easier for our customers or our potential customers, whether it's doing business with us, becoming more accessible, more responsive, or something that they already do that we have a core capability, or we could develop a core capability to help them do that. But I'm telling you, this whole thing of making things easier, like Seat, the car company, easier to get around while using all of your, personal data while connecting to the internet. It's just when you get that antenna always out, and it's so funny that you said that, because that's what I say to my clients. I say, listen, when you go out there after this, I want your antenna to be permanently out looking for ideas, because you can see something happening in an activity, a field, a business, totally unrelated to your business. And yet there's an idea in there that you can think, what would our version of that be? What would our version of that for our customers look like? And there's just a lot of fertile ground there.
Yeah, another way of describing make things easier, another slice and dice of this, is to ask yourself, where could we reduce friction?
Yes.
Because friction is things that slow us down. It slows a process down. It slows the adoption or adaption of something down. It slows things down. So where is there friction? And by specifically looking for that and identifying it, you can, again, innovate like crazy, because there's friction everywhere.
And I'll tell you, a great place to look for friction, Dan, internally.
Yeah.
How do we create friction with ourselves between departments? Where do we get in our own way? I had one client in England, and all they did, they did it as a 1-year project. We didn't use the word friction, but it was that exact idea of, let's look at everything and we're going to start internally. How can we become more effective, more efficient through innovation in working with each other? And then they shifted gears and looked at every customer touch point, everyone, website, telephone, everything. How can we reduce friction? That's another, it's just a great path to follow to put you on the trail to some terrific innovations.
So let's give a how-to right now, or a suggestion, and that is for all those that are watching this, why don't you do a friction assessment?
Yeah.
And again, if you try to do it to everything, you won't know what to do because there's so much.
No, be focused.
Narrow it down. So narrow it down to your personal area of focus. Maybe it's customer service. Maybe it's HR. Whatever the thing that you're focused on right now, ask yourself, where is there friction? Joe, I think you'll get a kick out of this because you've known me for a while. I wrote a article a couple of months ago that was pretty popular, and it was titled "Everything Sucks and That's Perfect." And the point of it is that is this the best experience we could have in our interview, or could it be better? And the answer is, of course, it could be better.
Sure.
Is this the best chair I could be sitting on? Is this the best lighting I could have? Are these the best glasses they could possibly make? And the answer is no. It could always be, but everything can be better, and that is perfect. You know why? Because if everything was perfect, the future would not need any of us. But because everything sucks, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of innovation to do. Everything could be better. And I love that, because it means there's a lot of work to do out there, and there's a lot of innovation to be had.
Well, anytime anything sucks, that means there's opportunity.
Exactly. And again, we're looking at, is it what's happening with inflation, what's happening with recessions, what's happening with all these different things. But problems are always, of course, opportunities, because there's the yin and the yang, the up and the down, the black and the white, the heaven and hell. I mean, the dualities. If you just look at dualities, a problem when something bad happens, I also like to look at what good happened, because something good also happened. By the way, if something good happens, I like to look at what bad happened, because something did. And then I like to take some action so that I can, again, make things better.
You know what? There's an obstacle, and I fall prey to this obstacle, which is I've done stuff the way I've always done it up to this point. It's hard for me, even though I talk about innovation all the time and think about it and help people with it, but it's hard for me to take a look at my own business and be truly innovative, because I'm doing stuff that has worked up to this point. And so it's hard to let go of that. I did a really interesting exercise with a Canadian company. We had people from all different departments at this event. And I had every department write down one of your greatest challenges. So sales wrote down one of their greatest challenges. I took it and I gave it to legal. And I said, here, help sales out with this problem. I took R&D's greatest challenge and I gave it to personnel. I said, I like that. What do you think personnel ought to do? It was extraordinary.
Oh, I really like that.
The salespeople looked at what legal said and they said, my gosh, this is a really great idea. And we would not have thought of that, because we're stuck in this mode of thinking that we've locked ourselves into. It was a fabulous exercise.
All right, so let's make sure that we tag that one as another thing that we're going to end right here. I think that's genius. I've never heard of that before, and I love it.
I made it up.
Because I think what we do is people, we want to be looking outside of our industry for innovation, but in this way, let's look outside of our own department for our own competency for innovation internally. And oh man, I really like that. Very good. Any other things that you or other people have observed when they're looking at innovators around the world, or things that you can share some examples of where you've helped companies have that innovative mindset or think differently?
Gosh, I think the biggest thing that I end up working on tends to be, as it should be, customer driven, customer focused. Going back to relevance, how can we be more relevant, not only to, and you talk about this all the time, to who our customers are? Because you talked about, here's an idea, you talked about the guy that said, oh, we're innovative, it's part of our culture. Yeah, 10 years ago. Yeah. The same thing happens, Dan, with people that say, oh, we know our customers really, really well. No, you know your customer 6 years ago. And there have been incredibly meaningful changes in that customer's life, in that customer's business in the last 6 years. And you don't know any of that. You just know that 6 years ago, you knew a lot, and you've kind of just glided on that ever since. And so to go back and understand I think just the word now and then going forward. What are the challenges that, for example, our customers face now, and what are the challenges going to your turf? What are the challenges that they will face, hard trend, soft trend, going forward, and helping companies think that through. This morning's meeting on telehealth, well, with healthcare, ended up focusing mostly on telehealth, where I would do a lot more of talking with my doctor exactly the way I'm talking with you right now. And the doctor will say, well, okay, let me look at your chart. I know from your wearable that your blood pressure is this. I know from the urinary flow test that you've been doing at home that that's looking okay, because so much can be done with telehealth. And again, that goes back to access, to reducing friction, to making it easier to access healthcare. And so I think what we have to do, because in healthcare, a lot of the resistance was, well, no, I've got to see them in my office because it's a very personal thing. No, you don't have to see them in your office. You can see them in their home. You know, we've got this thing now with cameras that we can do. So yeah. I think a lot of what we work on with people is simply understanding of removing the limits from what they think can be.
Exactly.
Which is hard for a lot of people to do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, when I talk about soft trends, remember, soft trends are based on assumptions. Yep. And what I get into, again, I like to keep it simple and not complex. I say there are two types of assumptions. I call them, to make it easy, a hard assumption and a soft assumption. So again, a soft assumption is based on everything that you've known going backwards, kind of like you're talking about. And it doesn't have to be 6 years ago. It could be 6 months ago, right? It's your perspective backwards. That's a soft assumption. Why? Because you haven't verified it in today's world. I want to elevate all soft assumptions to hard assumptions, which are currently verified. Is it still true, or have things changed? So I would say right now, I would take a look at your strategic plans and ask yourself, where are the assumptions? By the way, you're loaded with them. And then ask yourself, out of those assumptions, which ones are soft and which ones are hard? And you'll find a lot of soft assumptions that may or may not be valid, which means you got a lot more risk. And I'd like you to elevate them to at least being hard assumptions. Go ahead.
But yeah, just a quick caution for people. Steve Jobs said this. He said, if you can make things simple, you can move mountains. It's really easy to fall in the trap of making things, well, let's innovate. And then they start to make things more complicated. Innovation is generally about simplifying. It's not about listen, the market rarely, if ever, rewards anybody for making something more complicated.
Exactly.
But if you can simplify, that's gold. So I would let that be a guiding principle when you're looking at innovative ideas. How can we simplify?
Well, exactly. So there's a good how-to right there, is to look at anything, where's complexity? Yeah. And how can it be simplified right there? You know, Joe, your last book is, you have so many great books. I'd love for people to go to search on Amazon, just search your name and you'll find them. But let's put this up right here, The Leadership Mindset, How Today's Successful Business Leaders Think. Great book. I would highly recommend you start with that one. Although, again, you've got 8 books and they are fantastic. Joe, I think we're at that time where we've got to wrap this up. Yeah. But let me, first of all, really thank you for taking the time to be with us and share your knowledge with us. Your experience, going back over 35 years, it gives you a lot of wisdom, and you did share a lot of that with us. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Well, thank you. And let's remind everyone to keep your opportunity antennas up, and we'll see you again. Thank you.